Welcome to the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh's 2025 Banking on Business webinar. My name is Megan Kreider, and I'm a Community Investment Business Development Manager with the Federal Home Loan Bank. I'm joined by several of my colleagues today, and we are thrilled to be presenting this information to you. First, I'd like to introduce Melinda Ward, Senior Community Investment Projects Manager, and Precious Jackson, Operations Analyst. Melinda and Precious are the people behind the detailed operations of Banking on Business, and you will likely work closely with them as you move forward. Also joining us is John Bendel, Senior Director, Community Investment, Fred Duncan, Senior Manager of Business Development, Larissa Vasevich, Vince Moy, and Tom Westerland with Business Development Managers, Alexa Mascara, Manager, Community Products, and Kate Swanson, Senior Manager, Community Products. I'm glad you're tuning in to either introduce yourself or reintroduce yourself to our Banking on Business product, or as we call it, Bob. Bob is a really wonderful product that supports our small business lending and is only available to our FHL Bank Pittsburgh members. Our members give us great feedback about how to access Bob funding and how it has helped support their customers. So we're really glad to be offering it again this year as Bob celebrates its 25th birthday. Before I get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. This recording, as well as the PDF slide deck of the webinar, will be made available and emailed to attendees following the webinar. We've muted the lines, and if you have questions during the presentation, please place them in the Q&A box below, and our staff can address them at the end of the presentation. If there's any questions that we aren't able to answer specifically on this presentation, we'll follow up with you. The agenda today is here on this slide. For the information we'll cover on Bob, it's really intended to provide the high-level components of the product, processes for the application, disbursement, and repayment, and updates to be aware of for repeat users of the program. We'll cover the next steps available to you should you want to learn more following this webinar in order to best prepare your lending team to access the Bob funding when it becomes available. Before we get too ahead talking about the Bob, I'd like to give some background information on who we are at the Federal Home Loan Bank. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh is one of 11 banks established under the Federal Home Loan Bank Act of 1932. Our purpose is to increase the availability of credit for residential mortgage lending, as well as investment in housing and community development. Each FHL bank is independently owned and operated, privately capitalized, and organized as a cooperative. The Federal Home Loan Bank system is comprised of roughly 6,600 member institutions nationwide, and we at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh serve approximately 280 members that are chartered in our district of Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Our members borrow from us when they need liquidity, and through this lending with our members, we generate earnings, some of which are used to fund our community products. Bob is funded solely by the activity of our members and does not use any tax dollars. Of course, we're talking about Bob today, but I also want to take a minute to review the community products that are available to you as our member. Like Bob, these products further support our members and their communities. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to someone on our team to connect further. Starting on the left with the Affordable Housing Program, or AHP. We are required by statute to contribute 10% of our pre-HP income annually to fund the Affordable Housing Program. AHP provides grants up to $1.5 million for affordable housing development through a competitive application process. First Front Door is a set-aside program of AHP that can help income-qualified first-time homebuyers with up to $15,000 of down payment and closing cost assistance. First Front Door Keys to Equity Fund provides income-qualified first-generation and/or minority first-time homebuyers with up to $20,000 of down payment and closing cost assistance. The Community Lending Program provides our members with low-cost advances to support economic development, such as small businesses, infrastructure, and community development projects that are located in low and moderate income census tracts. Our Home for Good product provides grants to projects, programs, and activities that support those who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. Funding is provided to local service organizations by FHL Bank and our partnership with our 3 state housing finance agencies. Blueprint Communities provides local leaders the tools to develop a long-term revitalization strategy for their communities. And lastly, our Voluntary Housing Grant Initiative provides additional funding to address affordable housing needs in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Now we're going to focus on Bob, so I'll turn it over to Melinda for today's main event.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning, everyone. We will start today by covering the basics of the Bob product. So Bob was initially launched in the year 2000, and it was developed to support small businesses and communities. Bob provides funding to help fill the gap between what a small business needs and what your institution can lend. Bob also helps to create a positive economic impact on the community through job creation or retention. Bob is an economic development loan program. It provides secondary unsecured loans up to $300,000 to small businesses. Because these loans must be paid in conjunction with member financing, they're only available to members of FHL Bank Pittsburgh. And although FHL Bank funds Bob loans, they are originated and serviced by you, the member. Access to Bob funding is limited to qualified small businesses that would not be able to meet your underwriting criteria without the support of a product like Bob. To participate in Bob, members must enroll in the program, and enrollment is a one-time process. In 2022, FHL Bank created a set-aside of Bob funds for minority and women-owned small businesses called the Banking on Business Inclusion and Equity Fund, otherwise known as Bobby. It's hard to believe that this will be our 4th year offering the Bobby set-aside. As a reminder, Bobby is a type of loan for minority and women-owned small businesses. Bobby offers modified eligibility criteria that is more favorable in some aspects than our long-standing conventional Bob product. The last thing I want to note here is that Bob funds are only available once a year during our designated funding round. Participation in Bobby is completely voluntary. If you would like to participate in Bobby and haven't signed up yet, you need to sign up to FHL Bank's Special Purpose Credit Program by executing an addendum to the Bob enrollment agreement. New acknowledgements to the written plan were required to participate in 2024. If your institution did not sign the acknowledgement last year and want to participate in 2025, this must be signed prior to submitting Bobby applications. If you were unsure if you signed the acknowledgement, please reach out to our team to confirm. You can sign up for Bobby in advance of the round opening or during the round. This next bullet is critical. In order to comply with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, please make sure you are signed up for Bobby prior to discussing the program with borrowers and prior to submitting Bobby applications. Your institution is not covered under FHL Bank's Special Purpose Credit Program unless and until we receive an executed copy of the addendum from your institution. All right, so now that we have discussed what Bob is, let's discuss how it works. Bob typically starts when one of our members expresses interest in participating. As I mentioned earlier, to participate in Bob, members need to enroll. Participation in Bobby is voluntary, but if you would like to participate, you also need to sign up for Bobby, as also mentioned previously. Then, typically, a small business reaches out to a member with a financing need. They may be looking to start a business or expand their existing business. You review and underwrite the request. If there is a gap in the financing, you would need to determine the small business borrower's eligibility for a Bob or Bobby loan. Then your institution needs to approve or conditionally approve the member loan in the deal. During open funding rounds, members can submit applications on their borrower's behalf. FHL Bank will review, and if the application qualifies, we will approve the application. Then the member works toward closing on the Bob loan and the member loan. When you are ready to close, you close on both the member loan and the Bob loan. Then after closing, you request reimbursement from FHL Bank for the Bob loan. Beginning in year 2, you start collecting repayments monthly from the borrower. And also in year 2, you complete a one-time monitoring form. Annually, you will remit funds back to FHL Bank until the loan is repaid in full. Let's talk about the benefits of Bob and Bobby. So the biggest benefit of Bob is that it can fill the gap between what a small business needs and what a member institution is willing to lend. Usually a gap in the funding is due to a shortfall in equity, low appraisal, or weak collateral. The Bob program was designed to fit in within a member's underwriting process. As such, FHL Bank does not do any additional underwriting and has limited compliance monitoring. Loan repayment terms are favorable to the borrower, and in case of default, FHL Bank is flexible. If the member demonstrates the borrower's inability to repay, the loan can be forgiven. Because of these factors, Bob works well with other economic development loan programs. And lastly, Bobby offers an opportunity to support underrepresented minority and women-owned small businesses. So now we will review Bob and Bobby program criteria. So the chart on this slide compares the eligibility criteria for Bob and for Bobby. Bobby has enhanced eligibility criteria that is more favorable to the member and the borrower. Eligible Bob and Bobby deals are made of 5 main components. So for small business, for conventional Bob, the borrower must be a small business based on SBA or Small Business Administration size standards. For Bobby, the business must also qualify as a minority or women-owned business. At the time of application, the business must submit a third-party certification or complete FHL Bank's self-certification form. One thing I do want to point out here that has been a common point of confusion over the years, when FHL Bank is calculating whether a business is under the SBA size standards, we take related businesses into account. A related business is where the owner of the business applying owns or is the majority owner of a business of related or similar type to the business that is applying. So for example, if you're applying for a small business that owns a pizzeria and the owner of that same pizzeria also owns an ice cream shop, these 2 restaurants, we would want to include all revenue and employees when determining if something is under the size standards. Member participation. For Bob, members must finance at least 40% of the total financing. For Bobby, we've reduced the member participation requirement. Members must provide at least 25% of the total financing. Maximum amount. The maximum conventional Bob loan amount is limited to the lesser of $300,000 or up to 50% of the member loan. So if you have a member loan for $100,000, the conventional Bob loan could be for up to $50,000. Bobby funds are limited to the lesser of $300,000 or up to 100% of the member loan. So with Bobby, FHL Bank could match the member loan in the deal. So for example, if you were putting up a member loan of $100,000, a Bobby loan could also be the same amount, up to $100,000. Economic impact. All Bob and Bobby loans must demonstrate an economic impact. For Bob, 1 full-time equivalent job must be created or retained for every $35,000 in Bob funding lent. If the borrower cannot meet that requirement, there is an opportunity to make an exception if an economic impact can be demonstrated. For Bobby, the job creation retention rule will be the same as for conventional Bob. However, we have expanded the list of qualified economic impact activities to include that being a minority or women-owned business is acceptable to demonstrate economic impact. So this essentially means that any Bobby applicant will meet the economic impact requirement regardless of the jobs created or retained. For the funding gap, for both Bob and Bobby, the member must demonstrate that the deal would not meet its standard underwriting criteria without Bob and Bobby funds. So this chart is included in our quick reference guide and is a great resource for members when putting together Bob or Bobby deals. All right, so next I have a few case studies to illustrate how Bob and Bobby work. So in this first example, we see that an automotive repair shop sought $600,000 in financing to purchase and renovate a building to expand their growing business and to fund equipment purchase. Based on the lack of equity the borrower was able to contribute to the deal, our member was willing to finance $450,000. Despite a lack of borrower equity, the member was supportive of the deal as the owner already had a strong client base and was looking to expand by incepting other automotive repair businesses, resulting in the creation of new jobs while preserving existing automotive repair facilities. To help fill the gap, the member applied for a Bob loan of $150,000. So this is a really great example of how the Bob loan should work. On paper, the member could not finance more for their customer. However, the business's current success allowed for the member to take on this deal. So this next example, this is a Bobby loan that we funded during the 2024 round. This is an existing minority-owned and women-owned business providing gymnastics and recreation instruction to youth in Delaware. So to expand as a community resource and serve more children on the wait list, the business owners sought to purchase new gymnastics equipment for their expanded location. So due to a collateral shortfall and low loan-to-value ratio, with gymnastics equipment being so specialized, a member institution was able to contribute $50,000 to the deal, but looked to Bobby to provide a 100% funding match. So the member applied for a $50,000 Bob loan to fill this gap. And again, this is another great example of how Bobby can help. So the next slide illustrates a few Small Business Administration size standards based on the NAICS code. If you're not already familiar with the size standards, they are either by annual revenue or number of employees and are quite generous. So for example, a full service restaurant can earn up to 11.5 million annually and still be considered a small business under the SBA size standards. So business types that are not eligible for Bob and Bobby are listed at the bottom of the page.
Bob and Bobby can be used to finance a variety of uses, including but not limited to everything on this slide. Because we do not do any underwriting, we're really following your lead on what you're willing to fund. However, there are a few parameters to keep in mind. In deals involving real estate, the small business must occupy at least 51% of the subject property. And in deals involving refinancing, at least 33% of the deal must be made up of new money. Please note that we consider it refinancing if it's debt from within your institution. Moving on to loan structure. As a reminder, Bob loans are funded by FHL Bank, but they are originated and serviced by the member. At application, members indicate what term and amortization period they would like for their Bob or Bobby loan. The maximum term on a deal with real estate is 10 years, with a maximum amortization period of 15 years. Non-real estate deals have a maximum term of 7 years and a maximum amortization of 10 years. In all cases, the Bob and Bobby term or amortization cannot extend beyond the members. This is because Bob and Bobby loans are unsecured. We do not want the Bob or Bobby loan in repayment without your member loan. Please note, these are just maximum term and amortization periods. The member is expected to identify the preferred term and amortization periods at application within these guidelines. Please also keep in mind that members can select fully amortized terms, meaning the loan would be completely paid off at maturity. If you identify a Bob or Bobby loan term with a balloon payment at maturity, it is expected that the borrower will make that balloon payment at maturity. As mentioned earlier, the repayment terms on Bob and Bobby loans are designed to be favorable for the small business. As such, there are no payments in year 1 and no interest accrued. In year 2, principal payment and interest up to 3% begins. This up to 3% amount is determined and kept by the member as your servicing fee. In year 3 through loan maturity, an additional flat 3% interest is collected for FHL Bank for a total of up to 6% interest on the loan. The member institution is responsible for collecting monthly payments from the borrower and remitting annual payments to FHL Bank. Please keep in mind that Bob and Bobby loans are principal plus interest. Next, we will cover how to apply for, fund, and service Bob and Bobby loans. As we go through these slides, please keep in mind that Bob and Bobby follow the same application, disbursement, and repayment processes. During an open funding round, applications are approved on a first-come, first-served basis. Complete applications include a completed Bob registration form, which must have the member and borrower signature. We have one registration form for both Bob and Bobby, a copy of a credit write-up, approval or conditional approval of your member loan by the appropriate authority, and for Bobby, a complete application also includes an accepted third-party certification form or the bank's self-certification form. Complete applications are reviewed by us within 15 business days, so please keep that in mind when you're submitting the deals. Once approved, you have 90 days to close on the Bob loan and the member loan. And just like last year, all applications must be submitted via email to the Bob inbox. When funding a Bob or Bobby loan, members disperse the funds to borrowers and then request reimbursement from FHL Bank. 2 days prior to closing, we do ask that you provide us with the draft closing documents. We add this review step because we only want to reimburse Bob funds, and we want to verify that there will not be any issues with that reimbursement. Once the draft closing documents are approved, you close on both loans with the borrower, disperse the funds, submit the executed documents back to FHL Bank, and then receive the reimbursement through your member DDA account. Because we do not collect our first repayment for a full 24 months, we will reach out for an update during year 2. We have a one-page monitoring form which asks about the repayment status of the member loan, the Bob loan, and current number of employees. This process actually recently kicked off last week for projects that were funded in 2023. After that, as long as there's no issues with the loan, we will reach out to you once a year to collect the annual remittance. Prior to each annual repayment, a member of our staff will reach out to you to confirm the annual repayment amount. We always wait for your confirmation, and we will not automatically debit your account. Prepayments are allowed with no additional fees. However, if the member loan is paid down, we do ask that the Bob loan is paid down as well. In cases of deferrals, FHL Bank considers these requests on a case-by-case basis, but we prefer that the member is making a concession to their loan as well. In cases of default, we ask that you notify us as soon as possible and then proceed with your standard recovery procedures. You make yourself whole first, and if funds remain, we will take them. If funds do not remain, the Bob loan can be forgiven. Before we get into information about the 2025 round, I do want to pause for a moment to give Fred Duncan, Senior Manager of Business Development, a moment to speak about the benefits of using Bob and Bobby within your organization.
Thanks, Alexa, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I just want to touch on the 4 takeaways that I'd like to have all the lenders take into consideration when you're looking at the Bob and Bobby programs. The first is the fee income. Beginning year 2, you'll collect that 3% servicing fee, and that's taken into your fee income. I know a lot of institutions probably aren't doing pricing models for approval on your small business loans, but for you as a lender, if you get a couple of these loans into your portfolio, it starts to add up. And if you're doing an annual portfolio review with your chief lender, that's added revenue coming through your portfolio that you can point to. The second is the rate. As Alexa explained, 0% year 1, 3% year 2, and then 6% then on. From a blended yield or blended rate comparison, it's very advantageous to your borrower because it gives them the opportunity to really get the cash flows going and make those initial payments on your first and to get their business established and under their feet. Plus, in today's market, 6% final on an unsecured second is a very attractive rate. If your borrower is considering shopping the deal around, it gives you a competitive advantage when you're able to blend in that Bob rate along with your first and to get them across the finish line. As well, it's going to build loyalty with that borrower with you going forward. The third is the flexible uses. We covered some of the different ways that the Bob and Bobby funds can be used. One of the examples that Melinda gave that's a popular one is being able to use it for equipment. I know a lot of smaller institutions, the equipment financing is outside purview of the credit policy, and Bob and Bobby is a great way to come in and finance that equipment. Yeah, an example being, whether it's a restaurant or some sort of maybe a shop, or I think in the example that we gave earlier, kind of the gym, you're comfortable giving the CRE piece of that, but there's also equipment needs that your member has. So it's an opportunity to use the Bob funds to put towards that equipment funds or equipment needs. And if it doesn't cover it all, it covers a good bit of it and will make it more equitable for your credit committee to give a credit exception to clean that up. And then finally is the equity protection. With it being an unsecured second in a worst case scenario, it gives both your institution and your portfolio equity protection from loss. If you have any questions on the different ways that members have used the program in the past, or just want to talk through the process, reach out to your business development manager, whether it's Tom Westerland, Vince Moy, Larissa Vasevich, or myself, Fred Duncan. And we're more than happy to come out, sit down, and talk with you and your teams about the programs. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Fred. So now everybody, let's go over what you've all been waiting for, which is the 2025 funding round information. So this slide covers the details of the 2025 Bob round. The round will open on Tuesday, March 4th at 9 a.m. Our total amount available will be $12 million. $4 million will be set aside for Bobby. Members are subject to a 1.2 million funding cap in Bob and Bobby funds. The round will close when funds are exhausted. So if any Bob or Bobby funds remain available on Thursday, September 4th, they will be repulled and made available for any type of Bob loan beginning at 9 a.m. on Thursday, September 11th. Also on Thursday, September 11th, the member cap will be lifted. Please note, based on the demand over the last couple of years, we expect that the funds will be exhausted prior to reaching this point. So a second round in the end of September is unlikely. All right, so what's new for 2025? We just have a few updates for the 2025 round. First, the Bob application materials, including the Bob registration form and funding workbooks, have been updated for 2025. The new materials will be published online as well as circulated to members following this webinar. Please note that 2024 application materials will not be accepted. And next, we just want to reiterate some of the changes effective as of 2024. The $4 million Bobby set aside will allocate a fixed portion of funds to each group. And we did increase our review period from 10 business days to 15 business days. All right, now we'll get on to next steps. So this slide lists next steps to prepare for the 2025 Bob round. Confirm that you are enrolled in Bob, and if you are signed up for Bobby, please make sure you sign and return the document we need for 2025. If you aren't signed up for Bobby yet and would like to, please reach out to us and we will get you the information you need. If anyone has any questions about their enrollment status, please send us an email and we can look into this. Download and review the registration form and program manual. They are all available on our website. And lastly, get technical assistance. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or would like to talk through a potential deal rather than submitting via the chat today. So this next slide contains our contact information. I'll pause here for a moment if anyone would like to write it down. While you're doing this, as Megan mentioned, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll pause here and take a minute to gather those questions. So a few members also submitted questions in advance, so we'll cover those too. And before Alexa announces the questions, I just want to remind everyone once again that this is being recorded. So this recording, as well as the presentation slides, will be emailed to members following this webinar, likely early to mid next week. All right, so now Alexa, we will begin announcing the questions.
Yeah, we did have a couple questions that came in. So Melinda, do Bob or Bobby funds have to be used only for businesses in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, or Delaware?
That is a great question. No, as long as our member institutions are registered and located within the vicinity, we are able to provide Bob and Bobby funds to businesses outside of those 3 states.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there somebody that we can talk to if we have specific questions on potential deals? Who can they reach out to?
Yes, absolutely. Again, these presentation slides will be sent out with all of the contact information, but you could reach out to me directly to discuss any potential deals prior to round opening.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And can a borrower who has an existing Bob or Bobby loan apply for another Bob or Bobby loan?
That's another great question. So an existing Bob or Bobby loan would have to be paid off in advance or repaid in full, in order for that borrower to reapply.
And what time can we start submitting applications on March 4th?
The round opens at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, March 4th. So remember that time.
And I think one more question here. If we are unsure if our institution is signed up for Bobby, who should we reach out to? Can you provide the email address, please, one more time, Melinda?
Sure, you can reach out. Let me go. Can we go back to the contacts page? Sure. So you can reach out to the Bob email address here. So bob@fhlbpittsburgh.com. Or you can reach out to me directly. So if everybody wants to just take another second to look at this contact page. And then we'll look into that for you and make sure you're registered, signed up. And if you're not, we'll provide the guidance for how to get rolling.
Okay. There were a couple more questions that came in, Melinda. They are kind of specific. So if we did not get to your question, we will reach out to you after the webinar. We will follow up with you either via email or a phone call. But as Melinda said, all of the materials, a recording of the webinar, and the slides will be sent out very shortly.
So thank you all for attending today. We are very excited to pursue with the 2025 founding round, and we will be in touch with all the follow-up materials soon. Thank you.